Hey, how's it going? Thanks for joining us here today at the FFP. We're excited to do our last start-sit video of the season, week 17. And of course, we gotta say congratulations if you're in a championship right now. Of course, that's always really nice to be, but it's also very stressful. I know that it is uncommon for a lot of leagues to do week 17 championships, but we're here just in case. We know we've already gotten a few questions about that. And as always, because we're in the playoffs, because we're late in the playoffs, we're not gonna talk super in-depth about every single player. We're just gonna talk about the names that are worth mentioning, and if you have questions about guys that we didn't mention or we mentioned briefly, of course, just drop a comment down below. Now, before we get started, I think it's important for me to mention the playoff contest coming up. Whether you have won your championship or will win your championship and want to continue your success, or maybe you struggled this year and you want to find a way to redeem yourself, well, our playoff contest is definitely the way to do that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Basically, kind of the rundown for this is that you're just going to pick fantasy players that go into the playoffs, and hopefully whoever gets the most points wins. So I guess that's a really basic rundown, but what will happen is we'll make a video with all the details, and then you'll leave a comment of your roster there of all the guys. You can't switch out any players, so you kind of have to be able to predict which teams are going to win their games. Usually players that go to the Super Bowl have more value. Again, we're going to do a lot of details as we put the video out here in a couple of days, but it's just really exciting to do that. I wanted to mention it because keep an eye out and be ready for that video, because all lineups must be turned in before the playoffs start, and you can't change your lineup once that happens. And so we just wanted to clarify and put that out there. Rob, do you have anything you want to say about that before we?
Yeah, watch the video. It's fun. Last year I think we had 44 lineups. I think this year we're expecting about 100. A couple things. One, it's a free contest. Two, we are going to give away free merchandise. The top 10 finishers are going to get number one guy is going to get a free jersey, and the other 9 are going to get free t-shirts. And so look forward to a free contest. It's fun, exciting, a way to continue your fantasy football beyond week 17. So,
all right, well, let's get started with the first game then.
So let me just start here with Miami versus Buffalo. Before I get into that, I want to say I'm glad that championships that I've been in don't do week 17. It's a tough week to try to nail down, honestly. But we're going to do the best that we can to try to give you some information. This start-sit video is like no other that we've done before. You really got to throw a lot of the trends, the ideas, the way that we have kind of looked at start-sit videos in the past, and kind of toss that out the window. But here's some information. We'll start with Josh Allen, quarterback there of Buffalo. Versus Miami, allowing the 15th fewest points to quarterbacks. He had 4 productive weeks in a row, and last week he took a step back, and I think he had just over 11 fantasy points there. Now, you don't need to fear him sitting this week. They're obviously going to allow that rookie to play, continue to develop there. But the one thing you do need to fear with him is inconsistent play. He is a rookie, and he doesn't have a lot of great weapons, and he's figuring things out as he goes. Now, last time he faced the Dolphins, he ran for 135 yards on 9 carries. He also threw for 233 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Well, with so many question marks out there to other quarterbacks like Drew Brees, who we suspect is not going to play at all. If he does, maybe a quarter at most. And other quarterbacks like him, there's so many question marks that many are going to need to start him. But I would tell you this. Here's my take on him. He's got a low floor but a high ceiling. He's a guy that you could have a huge game with, but also buyer beware. There's a lot of question marks that go along with him. Once again, got talent, has upside, but it has a lot of question marks. You get Ryan Tannehill. The Bills are getting the fewest points to quarterbacks. That Bills defense is underrated. They're very good against the pass there. The last 2 good defenses that Ryan has faced, the Jaguars and the Vikings, he's averaging 7.23 fantasy points per game. Go ahead and sit that guy. Don't even think about it. Another factor is it's in Buffalo. The weather could be bad, so I would just stay away from Ryan Tannehill in this one. Look at the running backs, Kenyon Drake. So the Bills allowed the 8th most points to running backs. We were just talking about Kenyon Drake before we started this video here. I actually like the guy. I think he's got a lot of talent. When he touches the ball, he's explosive. 4.5 yards per carry. He's got 9 touchdowns on the year, 48 catches. This guy's got a lot of talent, but for some reason the coach is hesitant to commit to this guy, and it makes it very hard to trust him. He does have increased value in PPR leagues. That's probably the only league that I would trust him in. I'd stay away from starting him in standards, but I think in PPR leagues you could start him as a running back 3 or a flex play. Then you got Kalen Ballage. So after exploding for 123 yards, he comes next week, or last week he goes out and he has 4 carries for 10 yards. So it disappointed a lot of people there. This guy's got upside, he's got potential, but you can't trust him, especially with Bolden getting more carries lately, so I would just stay away from him altogether. As far as running backs go for the Bills, you got LaShawn McCoy. Miami allows the 5th most points to running backs, so he's got a great matchup against a bad run defense. I also assume that the Dolphins won't take a commanding league, which will allow the Bills to stick to the run, right? Everything bodes well for McCoy. Bad run defense, they should be able to stick to the run. With that said, you look at the ineffectiveness of Allen at times. the nagging running back injuries that he has had and other running backs have had, many other factors make it very hard to trust any running backs in that game on that team there. I would simply stay away from all of them. I could give you a deeper statistical breakdown, but I think it's really a waste of time. Honestly, I think there are safer options out there than trust LaShawn McCoy or any Bills running backs. I would stay away from all those. He is a running back 4. Wide receiver Zay Jones. Zay has played better of late. He's a 2nd-round pick from 2017. He's got upside, but he's a year away from being what I would call a startable wide receiver, so I would stay away from him. And then you have Robert Foster there. So he's a highly touted rookie in college. The guy just blew up in college. He's got some legit speed. Now, he's looked good last 6 games. In fact, 4 last 6 games, he's averaged over 100 receiving yards per game. His targets have increased as Allen and him are starting to develop rapport there. And so I like this guy. Now he's playing Miami, allowing the 11th fewest points to wide receivers, but with cornerback Howard out, their top corner, I think he's a good play as a wide receiver 3 in deep leagues, but once again, I would encourage you to watch the weather report there. It could get nasty. As far as Kenny Stills, Parker, and Amendola go, they're playing the Bills, allowing the 6th fewest points to wide receivers. A couple weeks ago, Kenny Stills started kind of re-emerging as solid plays in weeks 14 and 15, 13 and 14, I should say, but then in 15 and 16, he really took a step back. And so right now, all these wide receivers are playing a very good pass defense, and they have struggled, so I would just sit all those wide receivers there. I would sit all tight ends, and I would sit the kickers in this one. Once again, the weather could be bad. There could be snow. These are bad offenses. There's a lot of reasons why those kickers should be avoided. Look at the defenses, Miami and Buffalo. Actually, not bad starts. They're both playing opposing teams that give up a lot of points to defenses. So both Miami and the Bills defense are worth a start. There we go.
All right, now I have the Lions versus the Packers, and of course, we'll start off with Aaron Rodgers. I think he's actually a pretty good play this week. I mean, just starting off, like they're out of the playoffs, but Aaron Rodgers is such a competitive guy. You look at the game that he played last week against the Jets, like they're out of it, and you think a guy who's, he's a superstar, he's this big name player, he's not going to want to hurt himself. Now, he's out there playing like it's the Super Bowl. He was going like way over the top with everything. And of course, that bodes really well for the fact that like this week he's going to do the same thing. He's going to play to win, and he's got a good matchup. Detroit gives up the 12th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And last game, he just had his 3rd 400-plus yard passing game of this season. Plus, Detroit has given up 29 touchdown passes. That's the, I believe, 4th most in the league, and so that's just a great matchup. Rodgers is a good play this week. On the other side, an awful play is Matthew Stafford. Last week he was held to 116 yards or less in 2 of the last 3 games. Like, that is just absolutely awful. He has only 3 touchdown passes in his last 6 games, despite the fact that a Packers defense isn't a great defense. In fact, they're pretty far below average. Matthew Stafford hasn't been getting it done. As far as the running backs go, I also like Jamal Williams. He's got touchdown in back-to-back weeks. That bodes really well for him. Of course, Detroit gives up the 13th most fantasy points to running backs, and they actually give up 4.4 yards per carry and 114.3 rushing yards per game. So I also really like him. He's been turning it on lately. I don't think that he's, it's kind of been this back and forth all year with Aaron Jones and him, but Aaron Jones is out, and since he's been out, Jamal Williams has really taken over, and he's performed well. I'm not really going to talk about the Detroit running back situation as much as just say simply you should avoid it. There's not any guys in there that have enough value to play in a championship game. I mean, that's just a fact. If Kerryon Johnson were healthy and being the Kerryon Johnson that we expect he will be next year, that he was kind of starting to show us how good he can be, and of course play him, but he's not playing, and you have this mix of LeGarrette Blount and Zach Zenner and Theo Riddick and a bunch of guys who do just okay, like who just do a little bit, and none of them have enough value to really get in depth and break down the numbers, so I would avoid all of them. As far as the wideouts go, man, you got to start Devontae Adams. He's been insane. He has double-digit targets in 4 straight games, and he scored in 4 of the last 5 games. I believe he has 13 touchdowns on the year. He's been very productive and in a good matchup. Now he does have to play Darius Slay, who's actually a pretty good cornerback. However, the Lions actually give up the 15th most fantasy points to wideouts, and so that is a great matchup as well. On the other side, Kenny Golladay. We like Kenny Golladay, but he is banged up. He is questionable with a chest injury, and he was limited in practice on Thursday. Now, he did practice, which means that he's probably going to play. However, I think that you need to keep your expectations low because there isn't a lot of talent on that offense, and he gets a lot of kind of attention from defenses. As far as the tight ends go, you should sit all Detroit tight ends. Green Bay gives the 10th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. And then Jimmy Graham. Graham is questionable. He hasn't scored in 7 weeks while being held to 34 yards or fewer in 6 of those last 7 games. So the production just hasn't been there. You should avoid a banged up Jimmy Graham. Look at the kickers. Mason Crosby is a good low-end start. He hasn't missed a kick for the Packers in 3 straight weeks. The Lions, however, the Lions do give up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to kickers. I don't think he's an amazing kicker, but as a low-end play, if you don't have another great option, you don't know a lot of the kickers who are out there, you can certainly throw them on your roster, but I wouldn't throw him in your lineup, but I wouldn't really expect anything huge from him. It's kind of the same story for Matt Prater, just worse. Only 2 of the Lions' last 5 games has he made multiple field goals. The production just isn't there, and the Packers give up the 15th fewest fantasy points to kickers. Packers, while the Lions give up the Packers defense, while the Lions give up the 9th most fantasy points to defenses, they've really been fantasy-wise just a disappointment. I don't think they're a good play. I think you should sit them. And really the same goes for the Lions. This is a battle of 2 teams that don't have great defenses, especially when we look at their fantasy value.
All right. So Ron, looks like you're up for the Jets and the Patriots.
Yeah, the Jets traveling to New England to play against the Patriots this week. Start out with the quarterbacks. We're looking at Tom Brady and Sam Darnold. Darnold's actually looked pretty good since he's been back with the team there. The last time he played against the Patriots, Darnold wasn't in the game. And although it wasn't as close in the score, the game was actually a lot closer than the score told. Jets right now giving up the most fantasy points over the last 4 weeks to quarterbacks. A lot of that has to do with the guys they played against. Deshaun Watson lit them up a couple weeks ago with some passing scores there to DeAndre Hopkins. And last week, of course, Aaron Rodgers, as Christian just said there, had an absolutely amazing game, put up over 40 points against them in standard leagues. So, but they're just not playing well against the quarterback. I think Tom Brady, although he's only had 1 passing touchdown in 3 out of the last 4 games, he's actually had 0 or 1 touchdowns in 7 of the last 10 games. He's actually a very low-end quarterback 1. He could get some volume this week. And last time they played against the Jets, he had 283 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he still hovered right around that 20-point range for you. So I think Tom Brady's a very back-end quarterback 1 option right around the 11 or 12 range for me this week. So you could start him in 12-team leagues. Anything less than that, you don't want to start him. Sam Darnold, I'm not starting Sam Darnold this week. The Patriots actually, they don't have a bad defense, and Sam Darnold's 2 options, his main 2 options, are going to be covered because Bill Belichick, as we know, likes to take away the number 1 options on opposing teams. So I'm not going to start Sam Darnold this week, although he has looked good, like I said, since he's been back from that injury. On to the running backs. Excuse me, Isaiah Crowell is out on IR, and with that, Elijah McGuire has stepped up big time for the Jets. He scored on the ground in the last 3 games, and he's also had a receiving touchdown last week against the Packers. He's actually a solid running back too, and with Darnold back in the lineup, he's been able to check down to Elijah McGuire quite a bit, especially when the Jets are down, and we do foresee them being down this week to the Patriots. So McGuire is a good PPR option for running back too. Over to the Patriots, the Jets actually surprisingly giving up the fewest fantasy points over the last 4 weeks to running backs. And part of that is just the fact that, like I said, they played Houston a couple weeks ago. Houston did not run the ball at all once Lamar Miller was out of the game. It was just all passing. And last week with the Packers, Jamal Williams actually had over 90 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So they're not as great as the numbers say they are. Sony Michel is definitely a high-end RB2, but if the Patriots do get up big, he could see some opportunities get taken away by Rex Burkhead, as the share has kind of split up more evenly over the past few weeks since Burkhead's been back. But Michel's still definitely an RB2. James White's still flex consideration. He did have 3 rushes inside the 5-yard line last week, did put it in the end zone. So James White is always a great option in PPR leagues. He catches a lot of balls. Brady goes to him. And Burkhead's more of a running back 3 or 4. You're not going to be starting him, especially when your championships are on the line. Onto the wide receivers, Robbie Anderson has looked amazing, scored in 3 straight games, averaging 6 catches for 91 yards over the last 4 weeks. Definitely has a good rapport with Sam Darnold. And that's the only wide receiver you'd be looking at starting for the New York Jets. He's right around wide receiver 3 range this week. He's going to get the outside treatment of the Patriots with J.C. Jackson on one side and Stephen Gilmore on the other. And actually, Pro Football Focus ranks Stephen Gilmore as a top 3 corner this season amongst all cornerbacks. So he's just having an amazing season. He's really stepped up big for that defense this year. So I would lower expectations on Robbie Anderson. He's not going to have 9 for 140 or 7 for 100 like he has the last couple of weeks. But over to the Patriots, it's Julian Edelman, and it's nobody else in the wide receiving core. There's nobody else we can trust. With no Josh Gordon, we really don't know what's going to go on. Chris Hogan is an absolute crazy flyer, or Cordero Patterson possibly, but the only one you can really trust there is Julian Edelman. I would actually start both tight ends, Rob Gronkowski and Chris Herndon. Tight end, I've said it before, it's kind of a wasteland. Other than the top 5 guys, you're kind of looking at a mishmash of 7 through 12 there. So Gronkowski's in that range, and Chris Herndon gets the volume from Darnold, so he's definitely in the 7 through 12 range for you this week. Bench both defenses, and you can start Gostkowski for the Patriots, and I would sit Myers for the Jets.
All right. Let's take a look at the Panthers versus the Saints here. So Cam Newton is not going to play, and then of course last week it was Heineke, and now he's on the IR. So now it's to their 3rd-string quarterback. Looks like Kyle Allen's going to get the start here. He's a 3rd-string quarterback in a struggling offense. Their best weapon might be sitting. Coach Rivera came out and said that Christian McCaffrey may not play in this one. So there's a million reasons why. Just stay away from him. Don't even think about starting him. So we got the quarterbacks for the New Orleans Saints. Drew Brees. Great matchup, but they've locked up home field advantage in a bye at this point. There's no incentive for him to play Drew Brees, I guess. I would be very surprised. They've already talked about giving Teddy Bridgewater some extended looks in this one, and so I would sit Drew Brees. I do expect he's going to play, but I think that may be for 1 quarter. Come out, get a couple series there, and then they're going to sit him. Taysom Hill will get some looks here. He'll get some extended play in this one, but I don't think enough that you can trust. And like I said, Teddy Bridgewater looks like he's going to get to play in this one, maybe even start the game. But he hasn't played much this year. It's been a long time since he's been a starting quarterback. And most likely, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara are not going to play, or if they do, it's going to be very limited. There's a million reasons why I wouldn't trust that quarterback situation either. I would just stay away from that. As far as running backs go, I have Alvin Kamara. I think he sits in this one most, if not all, of the game. I would stay away from him. And then it's Mark Ingram. So Mark Ingram could be a sneaky play in this one. I'm not really sure how to evaluate this one, so here's my take on it. He could become the team's #1 back with Alvin Kamara sitting. He could get a bulk of the carries, 15, 20 carries, have a great game, or they could look to Washington and rest Mark Ingram, which is way I suspect is going to happen. I think that Mark Ingram might come out and get maybe 5 or 6 carries, but ultimately I don't think they're going to wear him down either. So I think that ultimately they're going to look to Washington. And I think most experts, as we study out there, lean that direction, that Ingram doesn't have a lot of value once again. He could become the #1 guy there, but I think ultimately he's going to get rested too. And they're playing Carolina, giving these 6 fewest points to running backs. So I would just stay away from Kamara and Ingram. As far as Dwayne Washington goes, it's a tougher matchup. You got Teddy Bridgewater starting with Brees, Thomas sitting. The upside is very low in this one. I would look elsewhere as far as that running back situation goes. Got Christian McCaffrey, who's having a phenomenal year, but the coach said that they could sit him to take a look at some younger players they want to evaluate for next year. I'm not really sure who those younger running backs are. You have Artis Payne that's probably going to get the start with him sitting, but bottom line is you're going to have to sit Christian McCaffrey in this one. Even if he does play, I just can't trust it at this point. As far as Artis Payne goes, the New Orleans Saints give up the 2nd fewest points to running backs there, and with Allen starting at quarterback, plus the fact that, if we're being honest, Artis Payne hasn't looked good. And other times when he's had extended looks, he just is not that spectacular of a running back. I would stay away from him. As far as wide receivers go, I have Michael Thomas. I suspect he's going to sit the game, if not all of it, a good portion of it. Then you have Kirkwood, Smith, and Ted Ginn. And so that kind of begs the question for me. If Drew Brees isn't starting quarterback there, how much value do any of those guys have anyways? Now, they're playing Carolina, give the 4th most points to wide receivers. Now, you look at Ted Ginn. He came back last week. If there's a wide receiver of the 3 that I would probably trust to be Ted Ginn. Came back last week after coming back from injury. He had 5 catches, 74 yards. So I think Ted Ginn is a guy that you could start as a wide receiver 3. Otherwise, I would stay away from the other ones. As far as DJ Moore, Devin Funchess, Curtis Samuel go, sit all of them with Allen starting at quarterback. As far as tight ends go, Ian Thomas, he's played well with Greg Olsen on IR at this point. Now he's playing New Orleans, give up the 3rd fewest points to tight ends. I wouldn't risk starting Ian Thomas unless you're in a daily fantasy simply because he's so cheap. But as far as regular fantasy goes, I would not trust him. Benjamin Watson, I would sit him and all other tight ends in this one. I would start Lutz and I would sit Catanzaro. I would start the Saints defense, and I would sit the Panthers defense in this game.
All right, here we are in the Cowboys versus the Giants, and one thing, kind of an overarching theme that I'm going to talk about for a lot of these players is that the Dallas Cowboys have locked the number 4 seed in the playoffs, which means very well they could be resting their players, and that right there is a lot of incentive to not play any of these guys. So let me get into it and talk about it. First off, I don't think you should play Dak Prescott. Not only did the Giants give it the 10th fewest points to quarterbacks, Prescott threw for only 161 yards last game. He gets a lot of his touchdowns on the ground, and that's a little bit scary thing that you really can't depend upon, especially at this point in the season where they're really not asking him to do a whole lot. Even if he does go out there, they're certainly not going to have him be running the ball, so you should stay away from Prescott. You should also stay away from Eli Manning. I mean, simply because it's Eli Manning, but I don't know, I want to go too deep on that, but the Cowboys allow just 235 passing yards a game. That's 9th best in the NFL. Manning has had 5 in the last 5 games. He's had 1 touchdown or less every game.
Yeah, now you add on the fact that Odell Beckham is out. I mean, yeah.
There's just so much wrong there. That is absolutely huge. And that is the other thing I was going to mention too, we'll get to later, but Odell Beckham is out, and that really kind of shakes things up. Now, Ezekiel Elliott is a tough one because I want to just say I love Ezekiel Elliott. I just want to be like, you just play him anyways. Who cares? He's got a great matchup against a team that gives up the 7th most points. He's got 100 yards from scrimmage in 8 straight games. But he has been held out of the end zone. He hasn't scored in 3 straight games. And again, he's probably the best player on that offense. And there's just no way that they're going to risk him getting hurt. I don't think you should play Elliott unless you're looking at your bench saying, I have nothing. I don't know if you guys agree with that. I know that's a bold statement and everybody's going to get uncomfortable with that, but it's just the truth. You'd be stupid to play him.
Yeah, there might be incentive. I'm sure he'd like the rushing title, but right now he has a large enough lead on that I think he could sit the game and still win it, honestly. The next guy behind him is about 200 yards behind him. So
yeah, it's 183 behind him, so I don't know. They'd have to have the game of their season to be able to catch him. So. Yeah. And like you said, they've locked up number 4. They're guaranteed to play the following week. It's not like they have a bye week where he'd miss 2 games. So I definitely think that he needs some rest this week.
Yeah. Now Jerry Jones and the coach have come on said that they're going to play, but I just wouldn't trust that coach speak in week 17, honestly.
Yeah, I just don't. It's too risky. And that's one of those, they'll play, but it'll be like 1 or 2 drives, and it'll be kind of disappointing. They'll go 3 and out, and that'll be it. They'll run some lame conservative calls. But we'll move on now. Now, Saquon Barkley is a guy I think you got to play because they're not in that situation where he's going to rest. He is going to play. He does have a tough matchup, so I wouldn't expect insane numbers from him. But even those defensive players could get rested quite a bit. However, it is important to remember that the Cowboys allow the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs and just 91.3 rushing yards per game. I believe that's 5th best in the NFL. And so they're really shutting down some running backs right now. And so even despite that, I think that you got to play him, but you got to play him with just a little bit of lowered expectations. I understand he may not have an absolute monster day. As far as the wide receivers go for the Cowboys, really the only guy that it is worth mentioning is Amari Cooper. And Cooper sits in that same situation. We're wondering how much is he going to play or isn't he going to play? Well, I think this about settles whether or not you should start him in your fantasy game, and that is whether or not he plays or not. It doesn't really matter. The Giants give the 8th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, and Cooper has gained just 52 receiving yards in the last 2 games. He hasn't found the end zone. He has struggled in the last 2 games. And as I mentioned before, Prescott's 161 yards last game. Not worth it. Definitely should avoid. Odell Beckham is out. If you want to put him in your lineup, that's certainly an option. You're welcome to do that, but obviously that's a terrible choice. This gives some huge value to Sterling Shepard. Again, it is a tough matchup, but last game without Odell Beckham, he had 6 catches for 113 yards, and I think he could be played as a good wide receiver 3. Another guy just like that, you got to play Evan Ingram now that Odell Beckham is out. He's got a good matchup, and he's had at least 75 receiving yards in each of the last 3 games without Odell Beckham. He's playing very, very well. I think you should sit all Dallas tight ends. Heck, Dallas tight ends that will be playing in this game, most of you don't even know their names. That right there should be an indicator to avoid them. As far as the field goals go, these are 2 not great options as far as kickers go, Aldrich Rosas has been a good kicker. He's booted 2 field goals in last game. He's been a very effective kicker, but goes against a team that gives up the 12th fewest fantasy points to kickers. Brett Maher, I hope I'm saying that right. He's had at least 2 field goals in 3 of the last 4 games. But again, if Prescott's limited, if Elliott's limited, if Cooper's limited, how much do you really expect them to get down the field and kick the ball? I wouldn't expect too much from them. I think that the Giants, I would want to say, okay, they should maybe capitalize on this week. However, I think you should sit them. They have just 4 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks, and so I think that you should avoid them. And the Cowboys, you should sit them as well.
All right, Ryan, you're up for the Falcons and the Bucs.
Yeah, on to the Falcons at the Bucs. Well, these 2 defenses are pretty bad. The last time these 2 teams played each other, they combined for 63 points, almost 1,000 yards in total offense. Starting with the quarterbacks, Matt Ryan, he had over 350 yards and 3 touchdowns in that last game. He's actually a top 6 quarterback in all formats so far this season. And the Falcons are still trying to put up numbers. They're still, fighting, even though they've been out of the playoffs for quite a while now. So I definitely think that you need to start Matt Ryan this week. This is going to be one of those situations like we've talked about in the last 2 games where they're going to be resting their players. So Matt Ryan is definitely a viable starter against the Buccaneers defense, who gives up top 12 most fantasy points in the league to opposing quarterbacks. Also, Jameis Winston. Now, Dirk Cutter came out this week and said that Ryan Griffin could see some work, but you still need to start Jameis Winston. I mean, in 3 quarters, he could definitely put up the type of numbers that are going to get you top 12 options, especially with some of these other quarterbacks sitting. He had 395 yards and 4 touchdowns the last time these 2 teams played each other, and he just had an amazing game. Now, he did have a couple of down weeks the last 2 weeks, but think about it. They were at Dallas, who Christian just talked about is a very good defense to opposing quarterbacks, and they were at Baltimore, who's one of the best defenses in the league right now to opposing quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, all those positions. So Jameis had a couple of down weeks, and I think he's still playing for potentially his job next year. I mean, he's been in and out of the lineup so many times, and they're still trying to evaluate what they're going to do with him in the future. So when it comes down to it, Jameis Winston needs to start, and he needs to put up numbers for his career. And he's going to be a viable fantasy option, definitely a top 10 play this week. As far as the running backs go, on the Atlanta side of the ball, Tevin Coleman, if he got you this far and he does end up playing this week, you're going to be putting him in your lineup. However, it's going to be a game time decision. You're going to want to watch that. If he does not play, you're not going to start either one of the 2 running backs for the Falcons. Brian Hill's probably going to get the start, but we're going to see a lot of Jeremy Langford sprinkled in there. The resurgence of Jeremy Langford, as I said before the video started here, we were talking about it. So you're not going to want to start either one of these guys to depend on for your fantasy championships. So no Brian Hill, no Langford, but if Coleman is in, you definitely want to start him. So watch those reports around 10:30 Central Time on Sunday. For the Buccaneers, Peyton Barber, probably a low-end running back 2, and playing against the Falcons, who give up the 6th most fantasy points over the last 4 weeks to opposing running backs. Barber has seen the end zone, not last week, but the week before, and the last time they played each other, he got in the end zone as well. So Barber's a good option. He's played well this season, and he's going to be probably a better option than either of the other 2 running backs there for Tampa Bay. So you're going to want to start him as a low-end running back 2. For the wide receivers, Mike Evans, of course, you're starting him. 6 for 90 last week with a touchdown. He's had quite a good season this season, and if Jameis is going to be throwing the ball, he's going to look for his number 1 option in Mike Evans. I would sit Chris Godwin this week, but I would definitely start Adam Humphries. Since week 8, he's running back or wide receiver number 13 in fantasy and PPR leagues since week 8. He's quietly had a great season, getting a lot of receptions, getting a lot of yardage, getting into the end zone. So you could start Adam Humphries this week as a wide receiver 3. Like I said, we bench Chris Godwin, but start Mike Evans. And for the Falcons, Julio Jones keeps showing up on the injury report, but every single week he keeps playing. He's averaging over 100 yards a game this season, and definitely going to want to keep producing. He's an absolute monster when it comes to fantasy. He put up 144 yards the last time these 2 teams played each other, so definitely want to start Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley I would start as a wide receiver 3, and Mohamed Sanu I would sit this week. And For both of the tight ends, you can actually start both tight ends this week. Like I mentioned in the last game, that tight end is a difficult position, but Austin Hooper had 71 yards and a touchdown the last time these two teams played. Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard combined for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. They each had a touchdown the last time these teams played. So both defenses are just bad. There's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. You can start those tight ends. That equals fantasy points. Bench both defenses, and I would say you can start the kicker for the Falcons and bench the kicker for the Bucs.
All right. Talk about the Jaguars versus the Texans. Start with quarterback Blake Bortles. The Texans have incentive to win in this game. You know, things could fall in the right place for them. They could actually get a bye. And right now, Blake is facing the Texans, who allow the 13th most points to quarterbacks. Blake has been bad all year. But if you look at his career, he's actually been at times a garbage time stud. He's a guy who struggled but put together some big fantasy games in garbage time. Last time he faced the Texans, he did struggle. And so when I look at Blake Bortles, he's a guy that could surprise us all. He could be a sneaky pick if you're in daily fantasy. He's the minimum price. He's the cheapest you can go. With that said, if you followed us in the preseason, you know that we predicted his fall this year. We said that you couldn't trust this guy, and I still don't trust him. And so I would sit him. As far as Deshaun Watson goes, playing the Jaguars, allowing the 7th fewest points to quarterbacks there. Last time he faced the Jaguars, he went 139 passing yards and he had 1 touchdown passing there. You add to the fact that Demaryius Thomas is now out. I think Kiki QT might be out. DeAndre Hopkins missing practice time is a game time decision. So for me, I still think he's a decent start, but he's outside the top 10. For me, he's about 11 to 15 based on your scoring system. And so he's a decent play, but he's not a great play. As far as running backs go, I have Leonard Fournette. He's actually doubtful for the game. It looks like he's not going to play at this point. Now, since Kessler took over at quarterback, that running back production has went down there. But maybe Blake Bortles coming back is going to be a boost to the running back production. We'll have to wait and see. The Texans give up the 9th fewest points to running backs. And so you got Yeldon and you have Carlos Hyde. Looks like the 2 backs that might see actual. Right now, Carlos Hyde is questionable. At this point, I would say if Hyde plays, I wouldn't start either one of those guys. They devalue each other. Although I would say this, if Carlos Hyde sits and Yeldon's the go-to guy there, I actually would trust him a little bit. Earlier in the year when he became the number 1 guy when Leonard was out, he had some decent games. I would say he's a wide receiver 3 or a flex play in PPR leagues. That's where I would play Yeldon. Once again, that's contingent on the fact that Carlos Hyde is out in that game, and right now he's questionable. As far as Lamar Miller goes, Lamar Miller, Foreman, and Blue. Miller is a full-going practice on, like he's ready to go, and he's going to play. Now, he's playing the Jaguars, allowed the 5th fewest points to running backs. With that said, I would still start him as a running back 2 this week. As far as wide receivers, you have Westbrook, Moncrief, and Cole, Jags wide receivers. Of the 3 right now, probably Westbrook is the best of the 3. 6 touchdowns on the year and recently had a little bit of boost in production. But he's not great. He still is only a wide receiver 4, so I would probably sit them. The other guys fall into wide receiver 5 or 6 category, so I would avoid all 3 of those wide receivers. Got DeAndre Hopkins. He was limited in Thursday's practice. Supposedly he's a game-time decision. Now, last week he was a game-time decision. He played well. Now, if he does play, he's going to see Jalen Ramsey. That's a tougher matchup there. He's a decent cornerback. But Hopkins is too good that if he starts, you got to play him. So for me, I would say that normally he's a wide receiver 1, but in this matchup this week, he'd be a wide receiver 2 for me. But once again, if Hopkins is a go, you got to play the guy. You'd be a fool. You sit him, he's going to blow up for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So you got DeAndre Carter, which looks like he'll be the guy that's going to get the most targets after Hopkins. So I would say still he's got a tougher matchup against the Jags. He, to me, is a wide receiver 4. Even though he's going to see increased targets, I would still sit him. Now, a lot of people suspect that Kiki QT might come back this game. He has a hamstring injury. He had one early in the year. He came back, re-injured that. And he's come out publicly and said a number of times that he is not going to play unless he's 100%. I don't see why Kiki or that team would risk him re-aggravating that hamstring injury going into the playoffs when they've already locked off a playoff position. He's going to sit. Even if he does play, I wouldn't trust him. Stay away. I would sit all tight ends. And then as far as kickers go, it doesn't matter if it's Lambeau, Forbath. Doesn't matter which kicker it is. I would sit Jags kickers. And then Kaya Fairbairn, is that how you say his name? I always get that wrong. Kaimi Fairbairn. I don't know. This guy has been great. You got to start him. He's been a kicking stud. As far as defense go, I would start the Texans. And the Jags are a fair play this one, but not a great play. There we go.
All right, I suppose it's my turn to talk about the Chargers and the Broncos. All right, so here we are now. Phillip Rivers is a guy who is a low-end start, and here's why. The Broncos give it the 9th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, and Rivers did struggle last game. He's held to 200 yards or less and and failed to throw a touchdown for the first time actually all season. That was against a very tough Ravens defense, much better than this Broncos defense, but again, the Broncos are still very good. However, one thing that I do really like about Rivers is A, Rivers has played well, and B, they're still fighting for playoff seeding as far as their positioning goes. Of course, they're in playoffs, but exactly what seed they get, I think that they will play and try to get that win for sure, especially in a divisional game. I actually don't think that they're going to rest him this week very much. On the other side, I think you need to sit Case Keenum. Case Keenum goes against the Chargers to give the 6th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, and he failed to throw at least 210 yards last game for the 4th time in the last 5 games. He just hasn't been productive. Melvin Gordon is a guy I think you should avoid. Not only is that a tough physical Broncos run defense, but he's just coming back from a 3-game absence because he was injured, and in that game he only managed 54 yards. While he did score, I don't think they're going to play Melvin Gordon much. Now, this sounds maybe a little bit contradictory. Why are they going to not sit Rivers? Why are they not going to sit their wideouts, but they're going to sit their running back? Well, it makes a big difference, A, because of the injury, B, because of that physical run defense going into the playoffs, and C, running backs, they just get hurt more. Like, you can feel pretty confident in your quarterback not getting hurt. You can feel fairly confident in your wideouts not getting hurt. Running backs almost always seem to have some sort of little injury, and again, going back to that's a little thing, but really compounds itself when you go back to the previous 3 weeks he missed due to injury. They're not going to risk it when you look at the production that Justin Jackson had coming off the bench and Austin Eckler, both guys who can get the job done. They can win without Gordon. And so that's kind of a bit of a switch there. Now, Philip Lindsay is out this week, and Royce Freeman is replacing him. I don't think he's an amazing play. Last week, he had 7 carries for just 21 yards. That's 3 yards per carry. And the Chargers are the 9th best run defense in the NFL. And so I think that is a guy that you should avoid. Unless you're in a standard league, you can play him with low expectations. Now, as far as the wide receivers go, Keenan Allen, he caught 5 of 8 targets last week for 58 yards. He didn't have an amazing week, but the last time he played the Broncos, he had 9 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. I think that you can play him this week, but I think you should have some low expectations. Again, I think they're a lot less likely to bench and to sit and to rest a wideout than they are to rest a running back. I don't know if you guys agree with that or have any comments.
Yeah, this one's tough for me because in theory, if they won and Kansas City lost, I think Kansas City's going to win, by the way. They could, in theory, win that division. And so I see that. I think Chris Harris being out is going to help. But yeah, it's how many carries, how many touches are going to. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of question marks in that game. So I don't know.
And they could be scoreboard watching the whole time. If Kansas City's up 2 touchdowns, maybe they rest those guys in the second half too. So yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah, it's
man, the NFL's clever putting all the important games at the same time.
I know, I hate that. And this is why I hate Week 17 championships.
It is. It just messes things up. It's so weird. But anyways, and then Mike Williams, the other guy there behind Keenan Allen, the guy I think that you should avoid playing this week. Everybody got excited about him 2 weeks ago. He had 76 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was without Keenan Allen, and everybody thought he was going to have another great week. And, then Keenan Allen comes back. He has only 1 catch for 7 yards. Now, that was against a very stout and dominant Ravens defense, but really, that's the sort of game that we've seen from him all year. 4 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago, Mike Williams with Keenan Allen was just average. He had 3 catches both games for about 52 yards and 45 yards, and so the production really isn't there when he's playing alongside Allen. I guess he just needs more targets and such. On the other side, Cortland Sutton is a low-end play. It's a tough matchup, but last week he caught 6 passes for 65 yards and a touchdown on a season-high 10 targets. And so despite that, Chargers being a tough defense, I think that could be a good low-end wide receiver play. As maybe a wide receiver 2, that's a bit of a stretch, but more of a wide receiver 3 for sure. I think you should sit all Denver tight ends, and I think you should sit Antonio Gates. Antonio Gates hasn't been amazingly productive. He's slowed down in his old age. I think a lot of people want to play him because last time he played the Broncos, he had 5 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. I don't expect him to repeat that, however. I think that you should sit both tight ends. McManus, he only kicked one field goal, or excuse me, has kicked one field goal or fewer in 8 of the past 9 games. And Michael Badgley, he has 1 or fewer field goals in 4 of the last 5 games. These guys just aren't getting many opportunities. And you should sit both defenses. Neither of those offense seems to be turning the ball over, giving a lot of points to defenses. So I think you should sit both defenses and kickers and tight ends.
So you're up for the Raiders and the Chiefs.
Yeah, I get the other side of that matchup with the whole AFC West on the line. Starting with quarterbacks, I mean, let's make it simple. You're starting the number 1 quarterback in fantasy, Patrick Mahomes. There's not much else to say about that. But onto the side for the Raiders. Now, with the Kansas City Chiefs giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over the past 3 weeks, some people might think that Derek Carr would be a good play this week. Unfortunately, that offense just has been not very productive. They did show up a little bit last week for their fans on their last game in Oakland, potentially. So it was a good game for the Raiders, but Derek Carr, I can just foresee that offensive line letting Chris Jones and Dee Ford get through a couple of times, and he doesn't do well with pressure. So not even in a 16-team leagues, only in 2 quarterbacks leagues would I even consider Derek Carr this week as a option, but definitely start Patrick Mahomes for the Chiefs. Running backs, you got to watch Spencer Ware. Things are trending upward for him. It's going to be a game time decision once again with this situation. Spencer Ware, like I said, with that hamstring issue is trending upward, but if he does play, he's probably running back 2 range, and Damian Williams is still going to see some work. He'd be in flex territory, but with no Spencer Ware, I'd move Damian Williams up to running back 1 this week against the Oakland Raiders. They're giving up huge fantasy points to opposing running backs, so if it's Williams by himself, Damian Williams, that is, by himself, I would definitely start him as an RB1 this week. For the Oakland Raiders, surprisingly, since Marshawn Lynch went down, Doug Martin has been RB25 and Jalen Richard has been RB27 in fantasy since week 8. Now, being the fact that this team is probably going to be down, Kansas City does give up the 6th most fantasy points over the last 4 weeks to opposing running backs. I would see this being as more of a Richard game, but I would only start him in flex territory. I don't really want to trust Doug Martin or Jalen Richard in my fantasy championship, especially Doug Martin with the team being down, probably most likely to the Chiefs. Richard would be a better play, but still flex territory for him in PPR leagues. Wide receivers, Jordy Nelson. Jordy Nelson has really come on over the last 4 weeks. The last time these 2 teams played, he had 10 catches for 97 yards. So he has had amazing games, 6 catches, 7 catches, 7 catches over the last couple of weeks. He's getting big-time targets. Jordy Nelson would be the only wide receiver option that I would look at for the Oakland Raiders. I don't know why I couldn't think of Raiders. For the Oakland Raiders right now, Seth Roberts has had okay days, but Jordy Nelson's probably a wide receiver 3, and that's the only guy you want to look at for the Raiders. You're starting Tyreek Hill for the Chiefs. There's not really any other Chiefs wide receiver that I can trust right now because obviously Sammy Watkins still not going to go, so just Tyreek Hill on the Chiefs side of the ball. Starting both the tight ends this week, Travis Kelce with the Raiders giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, and Kelce being one of the top 2 best fantasy options in the league right now. As far as the tight ends go, you're definitely starting Travis Kelce. Jared Cook has kind of one of these interesting home road split type of things that we used to talk about with guys like Big Ben, but if Cook does go, he's kind of banged up right now with a rib injury. If Jared Cook does go, you're still going to slot him into your lineup. He's having a career year this year, and he's one of the go-to guys for Derek Carr. So definitely going to start Cook Cook if he does go. Start Jared Cook. Bench both defenses, and you can start Butker, and I would bench Daniel Carlson for the Raiders.
Yeah, I think in this game there's definitely incentive for Travis Kelce. One, if they win, they secure a first-round bye, division, etc. But also, he's within striking distance of catching Rob Gronkowski's yardage record for tight ends in a season. He's not that far off. I think it's like 45 or 50 yards, something like that. And so, not that these coaches and teams are going to make that a priority, but in the back of their mind, that's there. So.
Yeah, there are a couple of guys that are going for individual records this week, and I think that part of that does play into whether they're going to be playing or not. And, if he's only 40 or 50 yards away from Gronkowski, I think he can get that in the first half against a very poor Oakland Raiders defense.
Yeah, another one is George Kittle. He's 100 yards behind the record. And I love it because George Kittle actually came out and said he wants to beat that record. I hate when players say that doesn't matter to them because it's not true. Yes, the team should come first. Winning comes first. I get that. But in the back of your mind, if you're being honest, of course you want that record. I love Todd Gurley. A couple years ago, they sat him week 17. He would have won the rushing title. He didn't. But he said that didn't matter. Well, then this year, finally, he came out and he just said, well, yeah, actually, I did want to win it. So I think, yeah.
George Kittle, actually, the week that he had 210 yards in the first half was only 5 yards away from the individual game record, and they didn't throw him a single pass in the second half.
Shame on the coach. Shame on the coach. So take a look at the 49ers versus the Rams. Jared Goff, a win secures a bye for the Rams, but I think they want to come out and have a good game. They have struggled lately, and I think they want to get things back on track. I think they want to build some momentum. So I think that they're going to come out this week, and I think that they're going to play well, and I think they're going to want to score some points and do some things. One, to secure the bye, but to really turn around a team that has struggled lately. Playing San Francisco allowing the 8th most points to quarterbacks, I think that Jared Goff is a good play this week. I like him. He's going to get double-digit touchdowns and get back on track. And then you have Mullins. The quarterback for San Francisco, I like this kid. He's played really well, especially when you consider some of the obstacles he's had to face. That team has been beat up. Their best weapons have been out. He's played really well. But Breda's going to be out of this game here. Their best pass catching back is going to be out. Pettis is out. And now Goodwin is questionable. And so I would sit Mullins in this game. So even though I like the kid, I like the way he's played, I would sit him. As far as running backs go, you have Wilson, who's starting for Breda. And so versus the Rams allowing the 14th fewest points to running backs there, but he's going to get heavy usage in this game. He's going to be their go-to guy. I think he's going to get a lot of touches, a lot of targets, a lot of carries. And so for me, I would start him as a running back too. He's a stronger play in PPR league scoring because he's shown that he's got good hands in the passing game. Now you got C.J. Anderson, Todd Gurley. They've come out and they said if Todd Gurley's 100% ready to go, he's going to play. I'm going to tell you right now, he's not going to be 100%. Why would you risk it? They're not going to do that, especially how well Anderson played last week. And so I would sit Todd Gurley, but C.J. Anderson, I like him. Playing San Francisco, allowing the 13th most points to running backs. I would start Anderson as a high-end running back too in this one. So as far as wide receivers go, you got Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods. San Francisco allows the 11th most points to wide receivers. I would start both as wide receiver twos. Now Cooks has been quiet the last 4 games. This week he rebounds with a big game. I see him getting 100 yards and a touchdown in this one. Thanks. You have Josh Reynolds. He's a wide receiver 4, just on the bubble there, but I would probably sit Josh. I like Josh Reynolds, but he's no Cooper Kupp. In fact, it's funny. That offense has struggled, and I think that we're just seeing now how good of a wide receiver Cooper Kupp is. And one insurance policy, he has been a check down guy that Jared Goff looks to quite a bit there. They miss him.
It's a top 3 fantasy option during his time in the league, right?
Yeah, the guy was really, really good. So Josh Reynolds is no Cooper Kupp. I would sit him. Then you got Goodwin there. Calf and Achilles remain sidelined in Thursday's practice. I would sit him even if he does play. He's going to face Peters and then Talib, and so I'd stay away from that. Then you have George Kittle. So after Kelsey and Ertz, George Kittle is the best tight end in football. Rob Gronkowski, I like him, but we just see him regressing quite a bit there. In fact, going into next year, we'll see. We'll evaluate in the offseason. We'll have to look at some things. But initially, off the top of my head, to me, George Kittle's going to be my number 2 tight end in my rankings, and here's why. Zach Ertz, I like Zach Ertz, but the one thing that I think is going to devalue him a little bit next year is that Dallas Goedert. If you watch this, Dallas has looked good. He was a highly touted tight end coming out of college.
Right.
I think it's going to hurt his targets. I like George Kittle. This guy is very talented. One thing that hurts him, though, is Pettis being out and Breda being out. Means he's going to see more double teams, but also he might see increased targets. And so, once again, George Kittle is too good to have to he's too good to sit in this one. You have to play him. I would sit the Rams tight ends. I would sit Gould. I would start Greg Zuerlein. I would start the Rams defense, and I would sit the 49ers defense. There we go. That was quick, huh?
Yeah.
All right. All right, here it is. Bears versus Vikings. Either going to be the best game of the year or the worst game of the year. That's for sure. We're excited to see what happens. This is going to be an interesting game. We've talked, a guy we all know here is Matt. This is a really interesting game as far as the Bears are in the playoffs. And Matt had this funny theory about how the Bears should rest all their starters, get game film on the Vikings. In fact, if the Vikings win and make playoffs, the Vikings play the Bears again next week in the wild card and would actually have game film on them and have their players rested. And so that is that interesting question. Again, the reason we hate Week 17 championships is who the heck is even going to play? Like, we have no idea. And so it is very interesting. I know you're thinking of going very heavy on some Vikings players in daily fantasy. I don't know if you end up doing that or not, but yeah, that is kind of a very, very real possibility, understanding that going forward as I talk about some of these guys. Now, for starters, Kirk Cousins is a good play. He has 5 touchdown passes in the last 2 games. Note that the last 2 games have been the 2 games with their new offensive coordinator, and so I think that's, a lot of times, it's just a fluke, he's had 2 good games. Well, with the new coordinator, I think that's I think that's a very good sign, and I think it is also a good sign. He had a pretty good week last time he played the Bears, 266 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 11. I think that you should I think that you should sit Trubisky. He's thrown for only 1 touchdown pass in 3 of his last 4 games, and he's held, and the Vikings defense have held 3 straight opposing quarterbacks without a touchdown pass, and 5 of the last 6 to under 200 yards. Sorry, I had to read it word for word. I couldn't get things out there. But so I think you should sit Trubisky. That Vikings defense has been very effective lately. And a guy I like in the running game, I really like Dalvin Cook this week. That is a tough run defense, but he has 17 or more touches in 4 straight games. He topped 100 yards. 100 total yards, for the 3rd time last game. And so he's been very effective. Now, the Bears only give up 3.8 yards per carry. I believe that's a league low, 5 rushing touchdowns all year. But Dalvin Cook has been on fire lately. I think that he's actually a pretty good play. Not a high-end play, but a play that could make your roster as a flex spot or a running back too. Jordan Howard is, I think, a guy that you should play again in a standard league a lot, especially. But also as a low end. Now, that Vikings defense gives the 10th fewest points to running backs, but if you're Bears, you want to rest some starters, you want to win this game, you're going to do that running the ball, keeping the clock slow, and letting something like that.
Milking the clock.
Keep the clock running.
There you go.
Keep the clock running, keeping the clock low, whatever that means. It is complicated. This is
15 minutes into a video, we're tired.
I'm very tired. I shouldn't have done my research at 4 a.m. I guess that was a mistake. But here we are anyways. He has 16.8 yards per carry of the Bears' last 4 games. I think they're going to just ground and pound, and they're just going to let him keep running the ball. I think he's a good start as a volume play. As far as the wide receivers go, man, the Vikings have so much on the line. I think you got to start Thielen. I think you got to start Diggs. Of course, you have them both in the same league. I hate to start 2 wide receivers in the same offense, but he has 5 catches. He has at least 70 yards in 3 of their last 5 games. Adam Thielen does, and so I think he'll capitalize on that. And Diggs has scored in 5 of the last 7 games. In fact, last time he played the Bears, he had 13 catches, 126 yards, and a touchdown. So I think you should play both wideouts. They've been productive all year long. You got to sit all Bears wide receivers. None of them have been very productive. None of them have stepped out. I don't think they're going to want to pass the ball a ton, and the Vikings give up the 2nd fewest fantasy points to wideouts. I think that's enough reasons right there. While Kyle Rudolph is tempting, he did have a career-high 122 receiving yards and a touchdown. That is the first time he has scored since Week 3, and the Bears give up the 11th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. Last week was, honestly, I think was quite a bit of a fluke.
Well, the fluke was that 144-yard touchdown he had at halftime, a Hail Mary. You take that away, and his day wasn't nearly as good.
First time he was a top 8 tight end since week 6 of last season or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Trey Burton, I think you should sit him. He has just 4 fantasy points per game over the last 6 games. The production just isn't there, and the Vikings give up the 7th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. As far as the kickers go, you should sit Cody Parquet, and if you're going to play Dan Bailey, I think that you should really lower your expectations. I don't think you should play him, but as always, if you're desperate, I think that you should understand that he's in that 15 to 12 range, so just outside of where I would say to play him. As far as the defenses go, I think you should play the Vikings. They have 50 sacks this year, and I think that they could go up against a very uninterested and simple offense. The Bears could run a very basic playbook. And I think that you should not play the Bears defense, despite the fact they've been very productive. The Vikings have given up just 4 fantasy points per game since switching offensive coordinators. And so I guess that's my rundown for that game, even though I stumbled through it.
So Bengals and the Steelers. Now, before we get into this, I want to hear your take on it because I'm doing daily fantasy. I've been doing pretty well there, and I was huge on Jalen Samuels as an option. Now James Conner's going to be back, but he's coming back. and I'm kind of wondering your take on how that's going to thresh out in terms of touches. But anyways, break down the game and tell us what you think, Ryan.
Man, put me on the spot here. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to start with quarterbacks, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Definitely starting Big Ben, as we talked about before the video here. Fourth overall quarterbacks this season in terms of total fantasy points per game. So the Bengals are not very good against the pass. They're one of the bottom few 3 or 4 teams in the league against the pass this season. And with the Steelers needing a win, I don't know that they're going to make the playoffs even with a win, but they definitely have hope here. So Steelers needing a win, Big Ben's going to be an awesome play, and he does definitely play a lot better at home. So you're going to start Big Ben this week. Josh Driscoll for the Bengals is definitely a bench. The Steelers actually have quite a good pass defense over the last 7 weeks or 8 weeks or so. They're top 5 in the league in pass defense. So and Driscoll, the value with him, he's not very accurate, doesn't have any pass catchers, and the only value he really has been on the ground. But if Mike Tomlin can focus on just that one offensive part of their game is Driscoll and Mixon in the backfield there, then the Steelers can focus on that. It should be a low-scoring game for the Bengals offense. But on to Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's actually the only viable starter for the Bengals offense. He's kind of got a lower expectations, though. Steelers do have the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs over the last 4 weeks. But Joe Mixon is probably back-end RB2 this week in PPR leagues. He's going to be able to catch some passes out of the backfield. If they are down and they do need to throw the ball, it's not going to be one of those type of game scripts where they can just run and pound it with Joe Mixon like they had a couple of weeks ago against the Raiders. Now onto the backfield for the Steelers. It is possible that we do see some James Conner this week after missing 3 or 4 games here now. I think it's been 3 games that he's missed. I mentioned in a different video, these college running backs that come out and they're not used to playing a full workload of 16, 17, 18 weeks in the NFL, they start to wear down towards the end of the season, and Connor's going to need to be ramped back up to get back into game speed. So I do foresee him getting some work if he is in the game and active, but I wouldn't plan on the full workload that he was getting, the 75 to 80% of the snaps and the carries in the backfield. And Samuels has looked good for them. He scored a touchdown again last week against the Saints defense, had over 140 total yards the week before, and Samuels has looked good, and they want to get him some more work as a rookie to see what he's got, because they are evaluating for next year, and especially if they make the playoffs, they want to have James Conner back next week. So I don't know if that helps your daily fantasy options at all.
Yeah, that's kind of where I assessed it too. I think right now I wish that Conner, I like James Conner, by the way. I've got him in a keeper league. I like him going into next year, but I was hoping this week that he just sat. That gives value. Right now I think they devalue each other to the point that I don't trust either.
Right, and honestly, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers think that they can win this game without Conner, and they'd like to be able to make it into the playoffs, and if they make it into the playoffs, they'd like to have him next week to play against, what would it be, probably the Houston Texans, I'm guessing. So that'd be a good option for them. Should we move on to the wide receivers?
Go for it.
Wide receivers. As you mentioned here, Antonio Brown, did you say he was getting MRI? Can you give me an update on that?
Yeah, I'm just going to take a look at his knees. Missed some practice with knee injuries. He came up on the injury report midweek, which is always a bad, when they come up midweek on the injury report, is not a bad sign. There's a bad sign there. So they're going to look at and see if there's any structural damage. At this point, all indications are that he's probably going to be fine. And if he's ready to go, he's going to play. At this point, if I put my money on it, I think he's going to play in the game, but I'm starting to get a little concerned.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, if he plays in this game, you're definitely starting Antonio Brown. He's averaging a touchdown a game this season so far, and he's definitely one of the top 10 fantasy options in the entire league as far as wide receivers go. Juju Smith-Schuster is another option that you want to start this week. Last week, he actually came out and said, even though he was banged up, he wanted to play, and he wanted to play for his fantasy owners out there because he knew it was championship week. He did have that fumble late in the game, but there's not much he could do about that. He was having a productive game up to that point. So both of these wide receivers we're going to start this week. If Antonio Brown were to miss, I don't think that I'd really be looking towards James Washington or Eli Rogers for the Pittsburgh Steelers, although that Bengals defense does give up a lot of points in terms of fantasy production to wide receivers, but I just don't know which one of those guys I would trust at this point. Washington has the more big play potential, and Eli Rogers has the more check down slot receiver reception target potential. So it just kind of depends on which guy's going to get more work. But as far as I'm thinking, I want to go Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and nobody else for the Steelers. There are absolutely no pass catchers for the Bengals that I'm interested in. With Tyler Boyd says he'd like to get back in the mix of things this week, but even if he does with that sprained MCL, he needs to work on that and get more healthy before he comes back. So no wide receivers for the Bengals. Not going to start CJ Uzomah this week at all. Pittsburgh actually giving up the 8th fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends over the last 4 weeks. It's actually a pretty good defense there. And I would start Vance McDonald with the 10th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends for the Bengals. I'd start Vance McDonald as a lower end tight end one, probably around the 9 to 10 range. And then start the Steelers defense. Like I said, the Bengals probably won't put up very much as far as offense goes. Bench the Bengals defense. And I would not start a kicker in this game at all.
All right. Take a look at the Cardinals versus the Seahawks there. So with quarterback Russell Wilson, who's quietly having the best season as a quarterback right now. His quarterback rating of 112.7 is great. He's got 34 touchdown passes, which matches a career best with 1 game to go there. And he's only thrown 6 interceptions. This guy's having a very good year. I think a lot of people would talk about Pat Mahomes, Drew Brees, other guys like that, but Russell Wilson's having another good year. He faces a tough Arizona defense. They're tough against opposing quarterbacks there. And I also have concerns in this game that's going to be a blowout and therefore reduce the need for Russell Wilson to have to throw a lot. And so for me, he's a quarterback with a safe floor but a low ceiling in this game. If you need to start him, great. Don't expect a big game from him there. As far as quarterback Rosen or Glennon, who's going to start, I didn't do a lot of research into those two because it doesn't matter, because it would appear to me that last week the best quarterback on that team was Larry Fitzgerald. He threw a touchdown pass. So right now both those quarterbacks are not good. They don't have a lot of wide receivers there. The whole thing's kind of a mess. Sit them both. Right now, look at the running backs. David Johnson. He's a guy that I think is going to get a lot of volume in this game. He's going to be what I call a safer play but a low ceiling, playing Seattle on the 9th most points to running backs there. So I do like David Johnson as a guy that's going to be solid. I expect him maybe with 90 total purpose yards and a touchdown. Not great day, but a fair day. Chris Carson. The guy's been on fire. The guy he runs so hard and so physical. He's looked great all year. But if I'm Seattle, the only thing that you're playing for at this point is whether or not you're the 5 or 6 seed. That's pretty much it. I think that they would love nothing more than to rest Carson if they take a big lead. They're going to have a first-round game regardless. They're playing the Cardinals allowing the 4th most points to running back, so the matchup is good. But I got to think that Davis and Penny are going to get their fair share of touches in this game, hurting Carson's value. I see Carson as a running back 3 in this one. I wouldn't trust him, even though he's been their best back in this game. If you can afford to sit and do that. Penny and Davis, they're going to split touches. I think it makes it hard to trust either one of those. As far as wide receivers go, you got Lockett and you got Baldwin. Baldwin's surging lately. He's getting healthier. The question is, who's going to face Patrick Peterson and how many touches are they going to see? How long are they going to be on the field? Are they going to risk re-aggravating Baldwin's knee injury in a game that doesn't mean a whole lot to them? And so now they are facing Arizona, allowing the 15th fewest points to wide receivers. So Lockett and Baldwin, I think, are low-end wide receiver 3 plays. Not great, not bad. As far as Larry Fitzgerald goes, he's the only wide receiver I'd consider starting for them. I would only consider starting him in PPR leagues as a low-end wide receiver 3 if you're in a large league. As far as tight ends, sit all tight ends. I would start Janikowski and I would sit Gonzalez. I would sit the Cards defense and I would start the Seahawks defense in this one.
All right, and we have a huge game as far as playoff implications go. Now we have the Eagles versus the Redskins. I know everybody can't wait for me to talk about the late season Magic Man Nick Foles, but I don't think that you should play him this week. I really don't. I'll tell you why. I think there's some better options out there. I think that he is a okay play. I think he's a very risky play with high upside, but he's also got high downside. Last week he did throw 471 yards and 4 touchdowns. He looked phenomenal, but the week before, he threw 270 yards and no touchdowns and an interception, and he struggled. And then he's played 4 games this season. His first game, he threw for 170 yards, or 117 yards, no touchdowns and 1 interception. And then he played Tampa Bay, he had 334 yards and a touchdown. He's so up and down. It's so confusing with this guy. I don't know how to read him. One game he's insane. The next game he's awful. I just don't know what we're getting with him. Now he does play the Redskins, and the Redskins is going to be a game where they have to win to get in the playoffs, and so that is very crucial, and that does very help. The Redskins team is not competitive right now. That passing game is weak, that running game is just okay, and that defense is not not great. And so once they get a lead, Eagles are just going to run the ball. They're going to play it smart. They're not going to ask him to throw for 471 yards like he had to last week. The only reason he really had to do that was because he's in a tough matchup, and a matchup against a good team, against the Houston Texans. And so I wouldn't expect that this week. On the other side, we see Josh Johnson. He has a good matchup this week, sure, but he's been awful this year. He has 3 touchdowns in 3 games. He also has 3 interceptions and has not thrown for 200 yards all season. I think that you should sit him. I think you should sit all Eagles running backs. Right now, the top running back in that offense is Darren Sproles. He had over 100 yards from scrimmage last game, but that was really due to what I would call an overproduction in the receiving game. He only had 32 rushing yards, so that means he had a lot of receiving yards, and I don't think you can expect him to continue to get that many yards in the air. He led all the Eagles running backs in touches, and that bodes very well for him. But again, there are so many different guys in that offense. I don't know who you can necessarily trust from week to week, and I feel like they have to get a touchdown for them to really have fantasy value to me, and you just can't know which guy's going to get it, which guy's not. Adrian Peterson is a low-end start, of course, better in standard leagues than PPR. It is his third 100-yard rushing game last week of the season, so that bodes very well. And the Eagles give up 102 rushing yards per game, which is 7th in the NFL. That's actually pretty good. So Adrian Peterson is a low-end start with standard league value. Alshon Jeffrey, another low-end start, probably wide receiver 3. His production has actually increased since Nick Foles took over, so that is good news for him. I think that you should sit Golden Tate. He has just 63 receiving yards combined over the last 3 games of production. For whatever reason, just has not been there. I know we talked about it when he was first traded there. Coaches just came out and said it's hard working him in the offense, and of course that's a very bad sign for any wideout. He did have 1 big game this year, but other than that, he hasn't been very productive. I think you should sit all wide receivers for the Redskins. Quarterback situation is just not good enough. Of course, you're going to start Zach Ertz. He does have a tough matchup, but he's coming off a huge week, 12 catches, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That bodes very well. Of course, it also helps that the Redskins have given up 24 passing touchdowns this season. That's only 14th in the NFL. Now, on the other side, Jordan Reed is out and Vernon Davis is out. So if you'd like to play a Washington Redskins wide receiver, 1, I'd say don't. 2, I would say definitely don't. And 3, did you know his name is Jeremy Sprinkles? I find that way funnier than I should, but I love that. He hasn't been very productive this year. He has 5 catches in the last 2 games. He's very touchdown dependent with that passing game, not even going over 200 passing yards a game. Really can't trust him. Of course, you got to start Jake Elliott. He has 6 field goals in the last 2 games. I think you should sit Dustin Hopkins. He does have 3 field goals in back-to-back games, but I don't trust that offense. Although it is a good matchup against the Eagles that give up the 4th most fantasy points to kickers. So I maybe would start him in that 12 to 10 range. Not high expectations. You should start the Eagles. They have a great matchup, and you sit the Redskins defense.
The Ravens versus the Browns here. You know what? I'm rooting for the Browns to pull off a victory. I love to see the Steelers get in. I know you're a Ravens fan, but
you get out of here. I don't like that.
Mayfield's a great story. Come on, go Browns fans. It's finally about time they've got themselves a franchise quarterback. I'm more interested here, not just the fantasy take, but first of all, before we get into the fantasy ride, who's going to win the game?
The Ravens are going to win the game.
Of course they are. We knew that, but
it's going to be low. It's going to be like 13 to 20. The Ravens win. Yeah. I'm actually a Steelers fan, so I'd love to see the Browns pull it off too.
But
Baker Mayfield,
right.
It's a great story with Baker Mayfield. I mean, he should have been the starter all season long. I mean, let's be real here. To start with the fantasy implications, I mean, Baker Mayfield, 342 yards the last time these 2 teams played. A lot of that might have been junk time because at the time the Ravens were up big, but he's a low-end option this week. Baker Mayfield's getting a ton of volume in the passing game, but 2 quarterback leagues, 16-team leagues, yeah, you can start him. I have him around quarterback number 14 this week because that Ravens defense is just absolutely phenomenal in all aspects of the game. I mentioned it earlier. They're giving up no points to quarterbacks, none to running backs, none to wide receivers. Actually, tight end is the only position that you can really get any points on fantasy off the Ravens. So, but Baker Mayfield is, like I said, right around my quarterback number 14 this week, so I'm not going to start him. With Lamar Jackson for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson's value actually comes mostly from his legs, but he has been throwing the ball a little bit more the last couple of games with some passing touchdowns. The Ravens averaging only 1.8 offensive touchdowns with Lamar Jackson in the game. If you extrapolate that over the course of 16 games, they're actually 30th in the NFL right now for offensive production with Lamar Jackson. And however, the rushing production, though, over the last 6 games with Lamar Jackson in the game, the rushing yards for the Ravens is the equivalent of 75% of the total rushing yards over the entire season for the Atlanta Falcons. So they're running the ball great, and he just hasn't had to throw the ball. It's been very low volume. I actually have Lamar Jackson outside my top 12 this week at number 13. So both of these offenses are kind of going to be low volume this week, low production. Both defenses are pretty good, actually. Over the last 4 weeks, the Browns are 10th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, which is surprising because, normally we think of the Browns and we think of poor defense, but they've been doing pretty well when that offense can move the ball. It gives the defense a chance to rest. So neither of these quarterbacks are starting options for me this week. As far as the running backs go with the Ravens, they all seem to kind of devalue each other. Gus Edwards is normally the starter, but he's actually decreased in snaps over the last 5 weeks every single week. And Kenneth Dixon has increased in snaps, and Ty Montgomery is getting a lot of the work as far as the passing game goes if they do need him on the field. So I wouldn't start any of these running backs, but if you do have to start one of them, I would say Gus Edwards is probably flex territory. He doesn't get any work in the passing game. I think he has 1 catch over the last 5 weeks. So very low volume there. It's all in the running game. He gets a lot of runs, but definitely don't want to be starting them in my championship weeks. As far as the Cleveland Browns go, Nick Chubb is a running back too. He's kind of the only guy there. If they are down, Duke Johnson was the pass catching back, but since Freddie Kitchens took over, they've really been up and down with the Duke Johnson game. 1 week he'll have 5 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. The next week he'll just be irrelevant. So it's kind of hard to predict what's going on with Duke Johnson there in the backfield, but definitely want to start Nick Chubb. He's been phenomenal this season, and he's a great option for your running back in your fantasy championships. Wide receivers for the Cleveland Browns, Jarvis Landry is the only guy I'm looking at. He has the easiest matchup. He'd be looking at Brandon Carr in the slot as far as the corner he'd be matched up against. And that's the easiest matchup on the Ravens defense because you don't want any of these guys on the perimeter with Jimmy Smith or Marlon Humphreys. So Brandon Carr is actually the easiest matchup. Jarvis Landry, when he's getting a lot of production, his yardage totals and his receptions actually are down, which is kind of backwards. The last 2 weeks he's had 8 targets or more in each of the last 2 weeks and finished as wide receiver 40 and wide receiver 59. So in his lower target production games, he's actually getting more receptions and more yards, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but he'd be the only guy I'd start as a wide receiver 3 this week for the Cleveland Browns. I would not start any of the Ravens wide receivers. Like I said, it's low volume passing offense. Lamar Jackson's not really throwing the ball. And when he does, we don't know which one of these guys it's going to. You got Crabtree, you got Snead, and you have John Brown there. So none of them you can trust because you never know which guy is going to get that 2 or 3 catches out of Lamar Jackson. Tight ends, actually, the Browns giving up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, but we don't know which tight end it's going to be either because they have so many on the Ravens team with Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle and all these other guys. So I'm not starting any of the tight ends for the Ravens. David Njoku for the Cleveland Browns, I would actually start him in this fantasy tight end wasteland that we have here going because, like I said, the only place that you can really get production out of fantasy points against the Ravens is the tight end position, and he has come on a little bit now since Baker Mayfield has picked up his game, and he had a productive game in the last game against the Ravens, so I would start him. You could start both defenses. Actually, it's surprising to say to start the Browns defense. They're a low-end option for defense this week, kind of a streaming option, but definitely starting the Ravens. I would start Justin Tucker and bench Greg Joseph.
So to our final game here, the Colts versus the Titans may not be an exciting game to watch, but there's a lot at stake in this game. We'll call it a must-win. Start with Andrew Luck playing the Titans, allowing the 5th fewest points to quarterbacks there. Like I said, this is a must-win. Luck has had a great year. Now, the Jags and the Dallas Cowboys have slowed him down 2 the last 3 weeks. But if you look at the Dallas game, that was really game script. They were up. They were destroying Dallas. They didn't need to throw a lot there. And so really, it's only the Jags that have slowed him down. He's having a very good year there. I like Andrew Luck in this game. I would start him. Now, granted, I think that Titans defense is good. I think that Titans defense is underrated, but I think that he's a solid play in this one, in a game that they're going to have to throw the ball. They've got to win. As far as Marcus Mariota go, he's on track to start. He's been hot or cold, hit or miss, or like we say in fantasy football, boom or bust. When I look at the Titans, here's what they're going to want to do. It's very clear. They're going to want to run the ball with Henry and play defense. They're not going to want to get into a shutout if they can help that. I would sit him. Last time he faced the Colts, he got shut down. I would sit Marcus Mariota in this one. As far as running backs go, you got Mack or Hines. The Titans allow the fewest points to running backs. I would sit Hines. But when I look at Marlon Mack, he's been a nice surprise this season, and he's a clear number one running back for that team there. He's been pretty productive. I would start as a low-end running back too, once again. Lower end because the Titans defense is pretty solid against the run. Then you got Henry or Lewis. I would say Lewis. As far as Henry goes, Derrick Henry's kind of had a resurgence lately. He's had 2 huge games. You take that away, he hasn't been that productive this year, but he has been productive in terms of touchdowns. He's still finding the end zone. In fact, he's got 8 touchdowns in the last 4 games, so I would say he's a high-end running back 2 in standards. He's a low-end running back 2 in PPR, so I would start Derrick Henry in this one. As far as wide receivers go, you got Davis. Indy allows the 4th fewest points to wide receivers. You look at Marcus dealing with injuries and inconsistency. That, to me, makes Davis a wide receiver 4 sit. T.Y. Hilton is banged up and he's questionable, but he's been banged up the last couple of weeks and he's been able to play. He's been on a tear the last 7 games. In fact, I would say statistically the hottest wide receiver in the last 7 games. This guy's been on fire. If he plays, and I think that he's going to play, he's trending towards playing. They need him to play. He's a must-start as a wide receiver 1 in this game. As far as tight ends go, you got Eric Ebron. He was listed as a did not practice for Wednesday's session. He's on concussion protocol currently. Now, everything from the team would seem to indicate that they think he's on track to play this week, but you're going to have to watch that closely. Titans allow the fewest points to tight ends. Last time he faced them, he got a 0, so that's not good. But like we've said all video long, that is a thin position at tight ends. He's got 13 touchdowns on the year. Therefore, if he plays, you're going to have to start this guy, right? Like, what better options do you have? I highly doubt you got Eric Ebron and Travis Kelce on your bench, unless you're in a 2-team league. So you're probably going to start this guy. Tight ends for the Titans, I would sit them. As far as kickers go, I would play both kickers, and I would say both defenses are what I would call mid-range plays. That's it. Our last game for our last Start Set video for 2018. I'm excited to do some different videos in the offseason. We're going to talk about like looking back to last year, how do we do, looking ahead to next year. We're going to revamp our start sit approach to next fall. But there we are. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, stick around. I can't wait to do some playoff stuff, man. When really things start to matter, these videos coming up are going to be very interesting.
All right. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, put them on the bottom. Subscribe, like, share with your friends. God bless.